like sometimes my kids are definitely plugged into me, or they're plugged into things that are going around, in and around them. And they pick up on stuff that I'm like, wow, I didn't even think that you would pick up on that. And my youngest, especially, is definitely, I don't know what he's got going on, but he's definitely in tune, like
Yeah.
at a higher level of things. Like sometimes he even says to me, he calls me out on maybe my mood or what I'm thinking, and I'm like, "Whoa, okay. I thought I
I
was
love
hiding
that.
that."
But they are super sensitive, and
Yeah.
that's probably one of their gifts that they bring into this
Yeah.
lifetime for them is that they're teachers
Yeah.
of the old paradigms. They're here to shake it up
Yeah.
and to make changes. And, as adults, we don't like our kids to tell us stuff, but they do sometimes. They're helping us learn.
Yeah.
So,
I definitely learn from my kids. Sometimes I don't like what I'm learning from them, but sometimes I'm like, I'm good with it. You know, s- you
and
said, sorry, go ahead, you go, you go.
Well, you think about the kids are, when they go back to school, it's like there's a shift of energy. When they go back to school, there's an elevated energy in the air
Yeah.
of all the kids going back to school. And thank God we're on a global spectrum. So there's different time periods where kids go back, but that creates a shift of energy in the air too. And then
Yes.
when they're off for break time, that also creates a subtle shift in the energy field.
Absolutely. That's interesting that you say that, because it's always feels like it's stressful in like the end of the summer, transitioning into like the beginning of the school year. It usually takes a couple weeks for things to like settle down. And you're right, energy affects all of us. And I was listening to one of your podcasts where in the summertime that you released, it was about energy and playfulness, and how energy impacts certain people, some people it doesn't impact. And like I had to tell you, that really resonated with me, because I went through a period of time not too long ago, like, a couple months ago, where in the summertime, right when you launched that episode, where I just felt like totally disconnected. I felt like not grounded. I didn't feel plugged in. And I felt a little lost and stuck. And you hit all those points in that podcast. And I'm like, oh my God, how
It's
does she
magic.
know?
It's magic. So I download energy. I
Yeah.
download the messages from the universe. And so I channel those things that are collectively being felt. And so I hear
Yeah.
that all the time. Jocelyn is like, oh my gosh, how did you know? It's because many people are feeling that similar thing in
Yeah.
that time.
Yeah, that
So,
was so crazy. And then it sort of started to ebb a little bit. Like that was probably June into July, and going into August, talking about school starting and the fall season hitting. I started to feel a little bit of a lesser lessening of that, like that heaviness, I guess I would say, like that. Yeah, I'm feeling less heavy.
yep.
And yeah, so I think you talk a little bit about that, but some people don't even feel it. My teenager's always like talk about kids. He's like, oh yeah, the energy, mom, peace. Okay, cool.
And
Like he's
they and they could be numb to it.
yeah,
They've built up kind of a bordering system or a shielding system so that they're like Teflon.
yeah,
It can just bounce off them. But at some point in their life, they will have a shift of sorts.
yeah.
Some people just have that when they're younger. Some people, it's all their life. It really depends on what our soul agreement is.
Okay.
But I think the general population, what we've been experiencing in over generally in 2022 is energy fatigue,
Okay.
and then trying to figure out what to do with this energy during pandemic times where things were shut down. We had to learn and be happy in just being in our own energy. And then when
Hmm.
things open up, we have to go back out and, oh, wait a minute, now be in everybody else's energy again. So
Yeah.
I think we've gone through this energy fatigue and not quite balanced out yet what
Yeah.
that is. And the fall and winter time helps us slow down, settle down a little bit, calm down, kind of rest, go into a resting mode.
Right. So, that's interesting that you say that. I was around my sister-in-law and my sister, at this summer when I went to Michigan to visit. I hadn't been to Michigan in a while because you talk about the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so I finally traveled for the first time up to Michigan, and I remember being in the kitchen with them, and I was like, "What is this? Like, I'm really uncomfortable right now." And then I realized that like it had been something that had been occurring every time I was around both of them. And I left the house and went for a walk. And I thought about like, what's going on. I kept walking and walking and walking. And then I'm like, oh my God, those two energies from those two people being in one room with me, it didn't work well for me, you know? And I don't think people realize that like the shifts in the season, the shifts in different occurrences like school going back into session or just being around different types of people,
Yeah,
it impacts you, you
it
know?
does, because everybody has a vibration.
Yeah.
And let's put some numbers to it, because science puts hertz to it, HZ, that's how we
Yeah.
measure energy. And so let's just say that your vibrational energy is 333.
Right.
And let's say your sister and your brother were different than that. They could have been 999, or they could have been, 2045, really high.
Right.
When you don't vibrate at that same frequency, it makes you feel off. And
Huh.
part of quiet time, especially during the pandemic, if people worked from home, you got accustomed to just your frequency. You
Right.
didn't have to adjust or adapt to varying frequencies. It's like
Yeah.
listening to a radio station and somebody is turning up and down the volume constantly. That would
Yeah.
drive you crazy, right?
Yeah.
And so that's your spot on in what you experienced, is like your body, your physical frequency was in between these two, and it clashed.
Mhm.
And that's what we're experiencing now. We're experiencing a clashing between people. We're experiencing clashing between the environment. Mother Earth is a different frequency than we are. So
Right.
we're experiencing this contrast.
Okay.
And in past times, we talked about it as people being introvert or extrovert, right?
Right, right.
Introvert, we like that quiet, or empathetic. Those are all terms around people just being aware of energy and what feeds them or what steals their energy, where they feel comfortable. Well, now you touched on there's other influences. There's the seasons.
Yeah.
Wintertime, fall, things are quieter, things are growing like crazy in the summer months.
Mhm.
There's eclipses,
Yeah.
there's full moon, new moon, there's planetary transits. All of those things impact energy.
Right.
And our generations have lost that connection to the environment around us. We go way back into like even Egyptian time period, or our
Yeah.
ancestors in native cultures, they were more in tune to the changing seasons, to
Yeah.
the changing of the emotional vibrations of people and the land.
Yeah.
And we've just kind of lost that. We have this expectation we're just going to stay humming along at the same pace all the time.
Yeah, and you talk about that, like the 3D world and our earthly experience versus like the universe and I didn't even realize that the moon. I mean, my cycles would always kind of like match with the moon, you know, and but I didn't even realize that some even mentioned like solar flares, that there's like solar flares that happen and
Yep.
definitely can impact your mood and your feelings and just everything. And it's science, you know, it's not like total
It,
woo.
and that's what I love. It's especially like the solar flares. We've had more solar flares. It seems like every year there's more and more solar flares later or in different times than we historically had experienced them.
Right.
And they're more intense. And that's just the sun is pulsing the earth with energy like every 2 minutes. I mean, it's crazy. But when we have these big bursts of solar flares, it's like a heat wave of what I call codes and keys
Yeah.
that begin to push us into turning off things, turning on things, or
Right.
starting or stopping things. So we've had more of that in the last couple of years.
So what are codes and keys? And like what if you just decide you don't want to deal with the codes and the keys? Like you get pushed into it anyways, whether you like it or not. I don't know.
Maybe it's my technology background, my,
Yeah.
computer science and technology background, but it's the best way to describe that,
Yeah.
in software, and we live in such a technology world that there
Definitely.
is software programs that run our phones and our computers and everything, and it just runs in the background.
Yeah.
But we get updates on that. So if you've ever gotten an update on your computer or your phone,
Yeah.
that's essentially what the universe is doing to us, is it's giving us an upgrade
Okay.
and new features or functions. So have you ever gotten a feature or function or an upgrade that you turn on your computer and it's like,
Yeah.
I don't want that. How do I
Yes.
use this? And it's
Yeah.
like, what are these buttons? That's what the universe does to us. It gives it to us in codes and keys. We get downloads, we get this information. Sometimes it just automatically gets turned on, and sometimes we have to actively turn stuff on.
Okay.
But it also means we have to turn things off because we can't just keep doing the same thing the old way over and
Right.
over and over and over again. And one of the things that I've noticed in the last couple of years too is that our interactions with people actually turn on codes for others. So I'm
Wow.
curious, like
Okay.
if old friendships have come in, old relationships, old memories,
Yeah.
those are turning on maybe some code that you have that
Okay.
you've just now gotten a key to unlock, if
Okay.
that makes
Interesting.
sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. So what if someone's like stuck? You know what I'm saying? Like what if they feel like they're stuck or they're not moving on or like they feel like because you talk about like 3D earthly timeline, then
Yep.
there's like a universal timeline or I think you mentioned like your soul has like a multidimensional blueprint. That's what I want
Yeah.
to talk about. That's what I had to
Yeah.
write it down. I was like that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a big word. So
Yeah.
like so, I mean obviously you're getting daily codes or keys that you download whether you realize it or not but like a lot of people like say oh my life isn't going the way I want it to go or I feel stuck or I said I wasn't feeling grounded or and there's different things that are happening vibrations frequencies seasons all kinds of stuff is happening the stars the moon everything right but like there's also an underlying thing that you touched on in a podcast I just listened to about like a roadmap, a blueprint that's not really here on this earth, like the 3D,
Right.
right? It's
Right.
what is that?
It's more of a there's a celestial. So we have a soul blueprint. Our soul has a journey through the forever, the ethers. And we come back to that blueprint. Think about building a house. You might make adjustments to that too. The soul can come back between lifetimes and make adjustments to that and carry on. But it's really a roadmap for how we journey through living or through experiences. And there really is no time beyond third dimension. Third dimension or time just exists in third dimension.
Okay.
It's how we measure things. But in other dimensions, it's based more on events and experiences.
Okay.
So when people say I'm stuck, I always say it's really impossible
Yeah.
because everything is energy and energy does not stay stagnant. Energy is something,
Okay.
and we feel nothingness, but that's impossible to be in nothingness because even in doing nothing you're doing something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I'm writing it down.
And so I know but it's the world and the universe operates on energy that is ever changing, never ending, so it's impossible to be stuck.
Okay.
It's our perception of being stuck that
Okay.
frustrates us. And that's where we begin to look at the difference between expectation and reality. Like, what am I really experiencing versus what do I expect to experience?
Right, right. Okay.
And that's wasted energy in that time. The best way that I can tell people is don't expend energy on believing you're stuck. It's like believe that you're exactly where you need to be at that moment and start telling the universe again and again and again where it is you want to be. Now, that's not always going to happen because you have this celestial blueprint
Right.
and the
Right.
universe is going to direct you. So if you're feeling stuck, maybe that's what your blueprint is saying
Yeah.
is from March to December in this year, you need to be in this place at this time and just be,
Right. Just
if
be.
that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Instead of feeling stuck, it's just you just need to be and like just let it resonate and just sort of feel it out. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, you also mentioned something about like, holding on to energy and feelings about certain situations or people and how it just ends up like I feel like, it ends up like hurting you more than it would hurt the other person too. So flipping that like sort of mindset. So instead of thinking you're stuck, maybe just you just sit still for a second just like if you're angry about something or you're upset about something, how like yeah.
Absolutely. It's like if you're upset with someone, is it really hurting them?
Yeah, no.
Or is it hurting you? Do they
Right,
even know you're upset with them?
right.
You know? And so it's really being
That's a good point.
directive with your energy. It's really deciding. I don't want to minimize our emotions because sometimes it is really important to
Yeah,
feel that and to say, I'm upset, but not to have it be so restrictive
yeah,
that it becomes a vendetta or it becomes, this grievance that you hold over a long period of time. That's what keeps you tied to a present place where the universe is going to continue to try to push you. Because
right,
again, the universe is momentum. The universe is always moving, and the
right.
universe will move you where you need to move. It creates resistance for you, and it creates more frustration. And you don't want to get into that level of vibration that
Yeah,
hurts. Those are lower vibrations,
right.
and they're just harder to work through.
Yeah. How do you work through them then? If you're like, how do you vibrate higher? Like, how do you,
That's that's
yeah,
that playfulness and that happiness.
yeah, yeah,
That's where that weaves in. It's like the universe responds to, I would say, joyful energy, or the universe responds to higher vibrational energy. And so if we are happy, if we are playful, if we are joyful, and we say, I want more of that, the universe says, I want more of that. If you are in this place of anger, frustration, feeling like everybody's against me,
right,
the universe responds to that and it keeps giving you that.
right,
So you want to almost force yourself into
right,
that playfulness or
right,
develop those habits
right,
of joy, playfulness, happiness
right.
until you can get in a more natural state. So it's like that statement, fake it until you make it. There's some
Yeah,
truth to that.
yeah,
It's
right,
like keep moving in that direction until you get the momentum in
right.
that space.
It's kind of like running. I hate running, but sometimes you just have to sometimes you have to run, and you just do it in little like increments, or sometimes you just
You
don't feel like doing
do.
it. You don't feel like doing something and you're like, but you still have to take the dogs for a walk. You still have to do different things in life, and eventually it
Yep,
sorts itself out. Um
absolutely.
so okay, so all right. So what about kids? Like you said that kids can like they're picking up on codes and keys and absorbing energy, and like they're teaching us stuff. Like I guess my question is, if you do have kids that are like sensitive or more sensitive or picking up on things and they haven't set up a boundary, or they haven't sort of shut things out like a teenager might, just put up
Yep,
walls. Like
yep.
what if it's too much for them? Like what if it impacts their moods and they're vibrating. Could you vibrate too high? Like, like I don't know.
Well, it can. Everybody vibrates at their rate. So it,
Right.
it could feel too high to one person or too low to another person,
Right.
but that's their natural vibration. So your question is very valid because kids traditionally are at a higher vibration than adults. We have learned, and our generations are just vibrating at a slower rate.
Yeah.
So it's really to have those conversations with kids, like what makes you happy? What do you find joy in?
Yeah.
Paying attention. Certainly, sometimes you do have to push them. I remember when my kids were little, we had a rule in the house. I'm like, you just have to try everything once.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't want to play tennis, how do you know you don't like tennis until you try it? You have to try
Right.
things. And so that is true for adults too. How do you know you don't like something until you at least try it? But
Right.
finding those sweet spots for kids that make them feel comfortable in their natural state might be quiet time or it might be rowdy, loud time.
Right.
It's finding out what that is.
Yeah.
So,
It's I never realized when I was younger. I used to always think that I had like anxiety, or I had the normal like, I'm about to go to a soccer game anxiety, you're nervous about playing the soccer game. But as I got older, I started feeling like a heavy, not heavy, like it was just a higher rate of anxiety. And I tried medication and all this kind of stuff. And I finally
yeah.
realized that it wasn't necessarily like my my energy. I was picking up on other people's energies and their thoughts and their feelings that like I didn't know how to process. And then it took me a while to figure out, yeah, it was just.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's hard to decipher you're like, what's wrong with me? Like,
Well, and we don't have the vocabulary, especially as kids, and
yeah,
most adults also don't have the vocabulary to explain like what's my energy and what's the collective energy. And
right.
I think that's what kids are showing and teaching us to develop that vocabulary around,
Yeah,
is it something that's happening around you or
right.
is it with you?
Right.
And in science, there's such a minute vibration between anxiety and excitement. It's
Yes.
crazy.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's excitement that tips over into anxiety, and sometimes it's anxiety. I've worked with a lot of on stage people before, and they say, like, I've gotten calls right before they're ready to go on stage.
Oh,
Like
wow.
they're having this panic attack. And I always ask them, I'm like, are you excited?
Yeah.
Or is it anxiety? Or are you picking up the audience excitement
Right.
to like bring it back into control or bring it back into, no, I want to be here. I'm excited to be here. And I think
Yeah.
that can be a tip that can be used for kids too, is like,
Yeah.
are you excited to go play? Get back
Right.
into the being excited about something. And that's that playfulness
Enjoy.
and
Yes.
joy versus I have to do it.
Right, right. And I also was talking to someone, they said like try to just get to like a happier place because being happy and being in a happier place is a stepping stone to getting to a joyful place. Because
Yes.
because happy's on en route to joy. I don't know. I was like, I like that. Okay, let's go with that. But it's hard to be happy all the time. And like you said, you still have to be able to have the moments. Like I had a moment the other day where I was just like, I am not good right now. And my one girlfriend's like, take a day, take an hour, take a minute. Don't just shove it underneath the blankets or put it, don't shove it out the door and don't address it because it's just going to keep coming back. Be in it, feel it, let it go. And sometimes that takes longer for others, but I did that. I did it. I spent like the day, and I was like, I don't know how to problem solve this. I don't know how to fix this. And I just kind of like sat in it for a minute. And then the next day I felt so much better. I did. I
That
did
is
feel better.
so healthy.
Yeah.
I mean, just be really honoring of your own system that you
Yeah.
need to do that. But the other thing that I want to say is that's so healthy because you didn't go out in the world and spread your junk.
Oh, yeah.
That's what people do. They're
Yeah.
like, I'm just going to push through it. I don't want to go, but I'm just going to go anyway. And they just spread that vibration
Right.
around.
Yeah, I don't wanna do that. I did have that feeling, I have, like, a social group that I meet, we meet weekly, like, actually twice a week, and I was in a bad mood, or I was telling you about the heaviness in the summertime, and I almost, like, thought maybe I shouldn't go to the meeting because I don't wanna put weird vibes out, and then,
Mhm.
like, I even at one point was like, "You guys, I just have to share with you, like, I'm in a kind of, like, a weird space right now," and they were happy that I verbalized it because they're like, "No, you're good," like, they were not impacted by it, so I felt good that I didn't impact them by it, but it's you brought up a good point because sometimes if you're in a bad mood, you need to just keep it to yourself. I will tell you, it's funny though, like, now that I'm kind of aware of energy and I'm aware of, like, where I'm at and the moods I'm in and, like, how I might be impacting other people, there's been a couple times it's been like, I don't how do I want to explain it? Like, I wouldn't say like I'm an empath. I can't read anybody's minds, but I can definitely feel energy now more so than I ever did before, or I recognize it. But like, there's been times where I've been doing something and I come in contact with someone, and I immediately am like, "Don't read my mind," and I'm like, "That is so weird. Like, why did I say that?" And I must have picked up on the fact that like maybe they might have been reading me or reading like what is that? Is that just energy too?
It is energy. So I'm chuckling here because we are all empaths. We
Are we?
all
Okay.
are just in varying, and those people that are more in tune to being empathic, they just are more developed in that space. And
Okay.
then you can use it to your advantage. I'm incredibly empathic
Yeah.
and I own it and I claim it, but I also have learned to use that gift. That's
Right.
evolution.
Okay.
That's being aware of the energy around. So when you had an empathic moment, I think.
Okay.
And so everything is energy. And so as I'm going to go back to kids for a moment, because when
Yeah.
kids are born, their energy fields, their physical body, their emotional body, their mental body, their spiritual body, all those energy bodies are wide open. They're
Right.
just
Okay.
buckets of love. They're curious, they're learning, they're developing at their fastest pace ever.
Right.
And as we grow up, we learn to shut those things down. So
Okay.
when I see energy fields, kids are wide open. They're like this nice bubble around them. As we become adults, we shrink that, we close it off.
Right.
But there's times that when we step out into certain situations, like I'm sure when you're with your kids, your energetic field around you opens wide up.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
maybe when you're out in public, you shrink it. And so
Okay.
I think you had an empathic moment where your field was more open and you
Right.
just bounced into or connected with that other person's energy field and felt it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that
Okay.
makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. What happens with kids if like what if they just are uncomfortable? Like what would you say to like a parent that has a kid since we're kind of like going to the kid direction? If they're like, how do you help a kid who might be extra sensitive and hasn't started shutting things down, and feels things too much, or like do they set boundaries? I mean, obviously we teach kids like look both ways when you cross the
Right.
road, don't talk to strangers online or in person, like still use your manners,
Yeah.
but like
Yeah.
if you've got kids that are more sensitive this generation, how do you as a parent teach kids to set boundaries or, energetically don't cross the road without looking. I don't know how else to
Yeah,
explain
it
it.
sounds crazy. I'll
That
tell you,
sounds
my kids are grew up incredibly empathic, and
okay.
I would put stones in their backpack, like
Okay.
a stone,
Crystals.
a really good crystal or stone, Jet, is an incredibly, it's a light stone because there's probably some of your listeners saying, I'm not putting rocks in my kid's backpack.
I know, right?
But think about how kids love to pick up rocks, right? And so I would put a jet in their backpack,
Okay.
or if they were old enough, my daughter, she had jewelry. My son, he would have bracelets with a
Right.
stone in that would ground them. Because
Okay.
sometimes if you have a child that is struggling with concentrating or focusing, they might need more of a grounding stone. If you have a child that's more aware of other kids' energy, or the teachers like says things like, my teacher doesn't like me, or kids don't like me, their energy, they're picking up that energy. So there's
Okay.
different things that you can, tools that you can give them before you have to start teaching them about, oh, you got to create a bubble around you. I don't like teaching that, because the gift that they are bringing to us is they are so open.
Yeah.
They are honest. And so
Yeah.
you don't want to shut that off, but you certainly want to make it be more comfortable for them.
Yeah.
Um, the second thing that I'll say is just the water, making sure that they're hydrated and making sure that they're eating good quality food is
Yeah.
really, really important for these kids, because that's a physical component for them.
Yeah.
And it grounds them in, then their physical body feels good without dealing with all the emotional stuff that maybe,
Right.
or the energy stuff that's going on around them.
Yeah, that's interesting. I just had that conversation with my husband. I call him the man babe. He's been doing most of the grocery shopping. I'm like, I would rather have you buy better, nicer, smaller cuts of meat. I mean, everything's really expensive right now versus
Yeah.
like the big, I have a family of five.